This is the Cricket Sadist Hour, and if you're watching this podcast in black and white, mid-off is the one next to deep square leg.
That is the name of the show. I am Jared Kimber. Alongside me is the only all-rounder that England have not picked of recent times. It's Andy Zoltzman.
Yeah, I take that as a personal affront. I've put the numbers up.
You've put numbers up.
I averaged over 100 last year, albeit in 2 games, and thanks to some truly Neanderthal fielding. Actually, the Neanderthals probably would have been quite good fielders. And I was bowler of the day in the Sick Children's Trust Charity Six-a-Side Day at the HAC in London last September, purely by virtue of bowling with both arms.
Also, usually that's not an award, bowler of the day, so it does sound like they made it up to make you feel better.
Well, I walked away with...
Were you one of the sick children?
I walked away with a bottle of rum. That's all I know.
How do you fare when you face left-arm bowlers?
When I face left-arm bowlers, well, I'm at the elite level of sport that I operate at, Jared. It's just a ball, isn't it? It's just a ball and physics.
It doesn't matter what arm it comes at you, you're probably not going to hit it.
I did play my first game of this summer last weekend, and I faced, for the first time I think in my life, the opening bowler, bowling. I'm left-handed batsman. He was bowling left arm around the wicket. I'm not sure I'd ever faced left arm round as a left-hander.
These are the sort of insights you get on the Cricket Sadist Hour?
Yeah, I mean, that's the Saturday friendly. It was, I think, 7th 11 technically of the Streatham and Marlborough Club.
So if I had a similar conversation with someone in a bar recently in the last year or so, Graham Swan, a man of similar talent to yourself, who quite late at night I said was 13-14 Ashes. You're facing Mitchell Johnson. Was that just the scariest thing that had ever happened? Was that the quickest bowling? And he's like, it wasn't the quickest bowling. I faced Shoaib Akhtar one day. I think he was batting with Mike Hussey, and Mike Hussey had done something to annoy Shoaib Akhtar, which then went on to annoy Graham Swan. So he'd faced faster bowling, and I said, then what was it? Explain to me why Mitchell Johnson had this effect. And he was saying that if you think about this, I don't know how I'm going to explain this on a podcast, but hopefully I'll be able to get it over. If you think about this, if you're a right-handed batsman and you're used to facing right arm quick bowling, essentially you sway away or you get inside the ball. These are the 2 basic sort of movements that you do other than a duck or trying to play it. When you're facing a left arm bowler, swaying away doesn't really work as well because of the angle, and trying to get inside it would be quite hard as well, yet again, because of the angle. So the problem was not so much that Mitchell Johnson was the fastest bowler they'd faced people as fast, it was that he bowled really fast at an angle that they couldn't get away from and they didn't know how to handle, and he did it consistently, obviously, over that whole summer. It was that conversation that really made me think about how much different facing top level left arm quick bowling is than anything else. And the other one that I was thinking about, which I'm sure all English fans think about to this day, of a certain vintage anyway, was Wasim Akram to Alan Lamb and Chris Lewis. Could you take us through those?
Well, that was... yeah, the World Cup final of 1992, and Pakistan made 249 in their 50 overs, which sounds like basically
under par,
eight all outs by modern standards. But in those days, that was a pretty tidy score. England were going okay; they were 140 odd for 4, and they needed about a run a ball, I think, in the last sort of 15, 16 overs. And Wasim Akram, he bowled a Yorker to Fairbrother that he just dug out, and then Lamb was on strike, had made about 30, and he bowled a ball that moved in, I don't know how many different directions, but enough. I mean, it seemed to sort of swerve in and then swerve away at high speed from around the wicket to a right-hander.
It's hard to tell because we were filming all this on Betacam.
Yeah. Well, it's largely just from the painting done by the official World Cup artist at the time, and it hit the top of Lamb's off stump, and he had a look on his face as if he'd been cheated by physics as he walked off.
I remember it as a kid of like this incredible ball that pitched on leg and took off, almost like a Shane Warne delivery. But when you look at it now, it doesn't seem to move that much. But it does tell you how rare it was for a left-arm bowler to exist in that era. And to come around the wicket, you only need to move it a little bit away from the bat.
Well, I think it was the fact that it did look like it moved in a bit and then away a bit. And I think that it was that... So Lamb got in completely the wrong position, having reacted. I mean, that's his big mistake, was reacting quickly. Whereas if he'd reacted more slowly, it would have been fine.
So next ball, Chris Lewis.
Next ball, Chris Lewis, the great all-rounder, who would clearly have won the game with a few mighty blows of his bat, came in, and he got a vicious in-swinger that started wide and then hooped in and cleaned him up fairly comprehensively.
Sadly for him, not the worst thing that ever would happen to him in his life.
No,
but it's a savage delivery.
It was a savage delivery, and this disappointing thing that happened in his life was not his own fault really. This was
just being Wazam Akram.
Yeah.
And the reason that sort of brought up those two is because Mitchell Johnson and Wazam Akram are sort of have shown Wazam Akram sort of inspired left arm bowling in many ways, and Mitchell Johnson maybe took it to another level when he had the magic summer against both England and South Africa. Left arm bowling has just got really good, and it never used to be good. In fact, before 1992, no one really even thought about left arm seam bowling. Ever. If you bring up Mike Whitney, I'm going to punch you in the face.
Mike Whitney is arguably the most influential cricketer that's ever lived. When he was called out of how it was playing club, was it county second 11 cricket?
It was nothing
played
good.
The Old Trafford Test in 1981, and if he'd caught both of them, then who knows what would have happened to the rest of the history of humanity. We certainly wouldn't have voted for Brexit. That is absolutely guaranteed. There had been some great left arm bowlers, particularly Alan Davison, who we'll probably talk about later on, through the late 50s and early 60s. But when Wazam Akram came on the scene, suddenly, and I don't know quite why this was the case, left arm started being used a lot more, and they're now being used more in Test cricket than at any point in...
They're now being used more in Test cricket than they ever were in the history of humanity.
From the First World War up until the day before Wazam Akram made his Test match debut, 10% of... only 10% of all fast balls in Test cricket were left arm. So 90% right arm, 10% left arm. And I've ignored, for these stats, Jared, those bowlers categorised on Cricinfo's Stats Guru as mixed stroke unknown.
Or the one bowler who had no arms.
No arm. Tom Kendall, who's a left arm bowler, who took 7 for in the inaugural Test match, bowled Australia to victory in Melbourne in 1870.
As we all remember. You were there.
I all remember tremendously well. So
10% up until Wazam, and then since then?
Since then, it's up to 14.4%. So that's nearly 50% more left arm than they used to be as a proportion of all the balls of fast bowling. And the wickets, similarly, 9.4% of all pace wickets in that First World War to Wazam Akram period were by left-arm pacers, and since he began his Test career, 14.3%. So it's led to a significant increase. Since Wazam Akram, it's been a continued rise for left-arm pace bowlers in Test cricket.
And I think you all know what this means. Welcome to the podcast of Mike Whitney.
Hi, you're listening to the Cricket Sadist Hour. I am the late king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, but you probably know me better as E.H.N. Presley, Gloucestershire Second 11, 1965 to 66.
Andy, you're of a certain vintage, so I'm going to ask you a question. Have you heard of Richard Collinge or Collinge?
Collinge, I have heard of Richard Collinge. I don't know if it's pronounced Collinge because it does have an E on the end, which suggests it's a soft G, or Colling. I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone say it out loud.
Which is my point to a certain degree here. That Richard, let's go with Colling. Collinge.
I'm pretty sure it's Collinge.
Okay, let's go with Collinge. Yeah. Let's go with something. So Richard Collinge was a tall left arm bowler from New Zealand. He retired with 3 pretty good records. The most Test wickets for New Zealand, someone came along and beat that, can't remember who. The highest score for a number 11 batsman at the time, 68 not out, which also came in the world record last wicket stand of 151. So that's 3 decent records. Unfortunately, as you may have guessed, if you follow New Zealand cricket or cricket at all, Richard Hadley came along and no one ever cared or has mentioned the name Richard Collinge since, sadly. Yeah, but this is a sort of podcast where Richard Collinge is a god.
Yeah, well, he 116 wickets, average 29, which is pretty tight.
That was literally my next line. So I demand respect for this man, who I'd never really thought of before, and it only occasionally come up in my research at all. So here's why I'm so interested in Richard Collinge. up until January, 1st of January 1985, Richard Collins had taken 74% of his entire country's left arm seam wickets. I knew you'd like that. We need a bell.
Very strong.
When we come up. So I think why I've mentioned Richard Collins, and we've already talked about it a little bit in the intro, is how much left arm seam bowling just kind of didn't exist. So pre-World War II, 14 bowlers had taken 100 test wickets. Not one of them was a left arm seamer. 4 of them were left arm orthodox. There were 49 bowlers who'd taken 50 test wickets, and 3 were left arm seamers. So as of January 1985, of the top 50 test wicket takers in cricket, there was 1 left arm seamer, Alan Davidson, who took 186 wickets at 20. There were 6 left arm orthodox, and of those with over 100 wickets, there were 13 left arm orthodox and 4 quicks. Alan Davidson, Richard Collins, Trevor Goddard, and Gavri.
Karsan
Gavri.
Plus Sobers.
Hey?
Plus.
Well, no. Sobers has to be an asterisk.
Yeah.
We don't know how many wickets Sobers took of what variety.
No. I mean, he got some just by putting the ball in his mouth and gobbing it down the pitch with incredible spins on it. Whatever took his fancy.
So Davidson, Goddard, Gavri, and Sobers, of the 5 bowlers that we probably know took over 100 test wickets with left arm seam, 4 of them are all-rounders. And weren't picked for their frontline skill, even purely for their frontline skill, which is even more interesting to me. So Richard Collins was the best specialist left-arm bowler up until Wasim Akram. I don't know what that says about anything. For those who don't know about Alan Davidson, he was an incredible player. I'm just going to focus on one test for Alan Davidson because I think this kind of explains it. The Tide Test against the West Indies at the Gabba. He took 5 for 135 and then went out and made 44. He then took 6 for 87 and he then went on to bat in the chase. They were 57 for 5 when he came in. They were chasing 232 and he made 80 and he was run out in the second last over trying to, I think, hog the strike in order to win the game. Incredible player. You know, in my mind, I've just given him a 3-year, multi-billion-dollar contract for the IPL.
He would shift units in the IPL. Yeah. And interestingly, in his first 11 tests, he didn't play in a single winning team, and he didn't take more than 2 wickets in an innings. And then in his remaining 33 tests, he took 171 wickets at an average of 19, which puts him in the top 10 best 33 test streaks by any bowler.
What peak 33? Is that what you
33,
call it? Yeah. Which hasn't quite taken off, other than you mentioning it a lot.
Yeah, I like to mention that.
So basically, if you haven't seen Davidson, there's some good footage of him on YouTube. He swung the ball like unlike any person I've ever seen. Like, it literally went in obscene. So it wasn't Akram swung it late and violently. Davidson would swing it early, but it looked like a computer game. It would like start swinging out of his hand and this just curve around to the batsman. So you've got Davidson, you've got Trevor Goddard, who was an incredible all-rounder. I think he averaged 30-odd with the bat and 26 with the ball.
26 with the ball, and he had an economy rate of 1.64 as a bowler, which says something about him as a bowler. He was sort of medium pace, steady.
Yeah.
And also something about the era of cricket in which he played and the team in whom he played. That he's played from the mid-50s, 1955 up until 1970. He played a couple of games in South Africa's last series before their apartheid ban. And the late 50s in particular had a lot of the dullest cricket, and maybe not the dullest, but the slowest cricket
The
ever
dullest
played.
cricket.
Yeah.
I think you were right the first time.
England, South Africa in, I think it was 56-7... had just some of the most spectacularly slow scoring that has ever been inflicted on cricket.
So, at this point, we have Goddard, Sobers, Davidson, 3 of the best all-rounders of all time, who all happen to be left-arm bowlers. We had Karsan Gavri, who, you know, is the Richard Collins, I've forgotten it already, of India. And up until 1st of January 1985, Pakistan had taken 66 left-arm seam wickets in their history. Azam Hafiz, who played for less than 2 years, took 77% of Pakistan's seam wicket bowling. All I'm saying is, up until Wasim Akram, we basically didn't have left-arm seam bowling.
Well, that's not strictly true. On Pakistan, so from the start of their Test existence in the early 1950s up until Wasim Akram, only 6.4% of their seamers' wickets were by left-armers, and from Wasim Akram to the present day, when they still have a barrage of left-armers, 32%.
So it is almost completely true.
Yeah, particularly from a Pakistan point of view. What's interesting is there were a number of left-arm seamers who had brief but very effective careers.
Like Azam Hafiz.
Yeah, I'm going back further through cricket. So you had for England Frank Foster in the 11-12 Ashes in Australia, when he bowled with SF Barnes. Foster took 32 wickets, averaged 21. SF Barnes, reputed one of the greatest bowlers of all time, 34 wickets, average 22. And Foster also got again, he was an all-round. He batted 5, 6, and 7 in that series. Got over 200 runs, average over 30. We had Whitty. Bill Whitty for Australia had one massive series against South Africa. And he took...
we all did.
He took a load of wickets for not very many. England had George Hurst, who was a left-arm swing bowler who played around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century and was effective in England. Averaged 24 in England, averaged 44 in Australia, setting a pattern for English swing bowlers that has been nobly maintained pretty much up to the present day. Alf Hall for South Africa played very few Test matches, largely due to business commitments, according to his Cricinfo profile, but he took 27 wickets at 18 in 4 Tests against England in 1922-23. So there were bowlers who had brief flowerings, but for various reasons...
The Mike Whitneys of their day.
For various reasons, including significantly the First World War, they didn't always have long careers. In the 1910s, as a brief decade, left-armers averaged 14% better than right-armers. This is amongst seamers only, and clearly that was a sign of impending apocalypse, and the world treated itself biggest ever conflagration.
Yeah, so, I mean, what we're saying to a certain degree is that there are 2 eras of left-arm bowling. There's pre-Wasim and there's post-Wasim.
Yes, but interestingly, Jared, if you're interested by the kind of things we're interested in, which, if anyone's still listening to this podcast, we can assume that they are, left-arm pacers average better than right-arm pacers in every decade from the 1910s up to and including the 1950s, even though they weren't bowling so much. So maybe you had to be very good to get in the team as a left-armer. Then right-armers averaged better in the 60s, 70s and 80s. Then it was pretty close in the 90s and 2000s. In the 2010s, left-armers are averaging 3% better than right-arm pace bowlers. So not a huge difference, but again, it sort of shows that we are in a golden age of left-arm pace. The age of Wagner.
And as we look down the scorecard, we see the cricket sadist hour. Court Zaltzman bowled Kimber naught. Another disappointing effort.
So we'll have a bit of a closer look at Wasim Akram and just how good he was, particularly in his pomp years, Jared. Got to use the word pomp in a cricket podcast. 1990 to 1995 in tests, 38 tests.
Have you got the stats on his hair in that time?
His hair was... I think it defies statistics. Let's just say it was magnificent.
But do you know, my career highlight was writing a piece so good that Wasim Akram thanked his hair sponsor on Twitter because of my piece. But anyway, continue.
He played 38 tests in those 6 years, took 195 wickets, averaged 19.8, which is pretty
Get out of here.
And also 165 wickets in 107 ODIs at an average of 21.6. So he was pretty good. Interestingly, we mentioned him destroying the England middle order in that World Cup final. That was sort of Pakistan were on top anyway, but that basically ended the game. Those two balls. He had his worst record against England, despite having played so much in England. He averaged 30 against England in Test cricket and 35 in ODI cricket. So that just goes to show that England is the greatest cricket team that has ever existed.
If anyone conquered Wasim, it was England.
In the 1990s, you look at fast bowlers with at least 25 wickets. 3 of the top 5 in terms of average are left-arm pacers, which is Bruce Reid at the top, Brett Schultz, another left-arm paceman ruined by injury, and Wasim Akram 5th with Ambrose and Sean Pollock in between. The 1980s, there had only been 5 left-arm bowlers with 25 wickets or more. There were 8 in the 1990s, 14 in the 2000s, and there have been 12 this decade.
Wasim Akram, it's funny, I remember someone saying on Twitter recently that if you really look at his record, it was very, very good, but it wasn't like he was about to get a wicket every ball, which is the way that is now remembered now. But for us, growing up in that era, he was like no other bowler. I mean, the only 2 bowlers I ever tried to bowl like in the backyard, pace bowlers, was Wasim Akram and Curtly Ambrose.
So 2 very different bowlers to modern.
Very bowlers. But the idea of like Wasim Akram coming in with those tiny little steps and then being all shoulder and then just being able to bowl a delivery that just didn't make sense. The amount of times, even without reverse swing, quite often, the amount of times in the middle of a one-day game, people don't remember. If you think one-day cricket is boring now, the middle overs in the 90s, and I wasn't even old enough for the 80s, I'm assuming that was worse. But the middle overs in the 90s were terrible. Wasim Akram meant that you had to watch the entirety of the game because you didn't know what he was going to do in that middle part of the game. And there would always, the Alan Lamb, Chris Lewis delivery. It felt like every game he had a delivery like that just changed and they were never out of the game because of Wasim Akram. And that's more a one-day thing, but he also did similar things like that in test matches.
Yes, there were, particularly the 92 Test series in England, which was a really interesting series. Pakistan won 2-1 with a brilliant win at Lords in a really tight, low-scoring game, and then they demolished England at the Oval, and England won at Headingley, I think, in between. And Wagner and Wasim several times destroyed England when they were looking quite well set. And the Oval was one of my favourite displays of team bowling. And it was one of the rare days I actually went to see Test cricket, and it was had Waqar, Wasim, and then Mushtaq Ahmed came on bowling unreadable leg spin during his brief pomp as a Test leggy. There were times when there were a number of balls in that series, and really throughout his career, and particularly those 2 in the World Cup final, which had been earlier that year. He could have written to the batsman several months in advance and said, "This is exactly what I'm going to bowl," and it would still have got them out.
It's quite interesting. As good as he was, and I like the idea of him writing a letter and them still getting someone to deliver it.
Yeah, hand delivered to the England dressing room.
But there was clearly something happening in cricket. I mean, he's a bit like the Gilchrist in that he was maybe the most obvious player, but Bruce Reid hadn't have been injured, he would have gone on to take 300-400 Test wickets at a very low average. Brett Schultz was probably, if he wasn't quicker than Akram, he was close to as quick as Akram. A big, burly guy, wasn't he? He was an incredible bowler. We then also had Chaminda Vaas, who, and why I'm interested in Chaminda Vaas is the first Test series I saw him, he must have been about 96 in Australia. It must have been 96 in Australia. And he was bowling, and the whole series, Ian Chappell just kept saying, he's a good bowler, this guy. Be a really good first change bowler. And the reason that's interesting to me is up until that point, left-arm bowlers had been quite exotic and whatever. Chaminda Vaas is almost the first time that we started to see dour left-arm bowling and average left-arm bowling. And he obviously went on to have a great career, but there was no Wasim Akram or Bruce Reid type ability, or he wasn't quick like Brett Schultz. That was the point. Chaminda Vaas is almost a more interesting... Well, I just want to take back the word interesting. But he's almost a more interesting development in left-arm bowlers in that he was basically just a very decently medium-fast bowler rather than something exotic and wild and crazy. Not that he couldn't bowl the odd magic ball himself, but, I don't know, who would he be like? It's sort of like a...
Well, Philander?
Yeah, Philander, maybe a Damien Fleming type bowler. Right arm bowling has had hundreds of Chaminda Vasas up until that point, but realistically, left arm bowling just never did. It had the odd magic bowler, and as you said, the odd bowler who appeared every now and again. And there's no reason to fetishize Vas. He was just really good at what he did, just a quality seamer. Who I can't remember his record off the top of his head, but I'll look it up. 355 wickets at 29, which for an Asian bowler is quite a good average. But I suppose because of Schultz and Reed and Akram all coming through, and Mike Whitney, all coming through at that era, Mullally?
Alan Mullally, the corridor of unreachability.
We suddenly had a period where it seemed for the first time ever we did actually have a lot of left-arm bowlers. And Wasim Akram is the one we focus on, and we've obviously put all of our numbers around. But realistically, for whatever reason, from the 80s onwards, people started recognising left-arm bowling more and trying more left-arm bowlers. And I find that really interesting.
Yes. Well, with Vas, I guess, we talked about Karsan Gavri of India.
More than anyone has.
I never saw him bowl, but he was left arm medium.
Yeah.
Trevor Goddard similarly, so maybe there were some precedents for. What was fascinating about Vas is you would watch him and you think, well, there's really nothing of any interest there. But he was clearly an incredible craftsman.
Oh yeah,
he never did well in England, but there was the series England played in Sri Lanka when he got Atherton out about 3 or 4 times a match, I think.
Yeah.
LBW.
Wait, just let me check the stats.
Was,
3 or 4 times a match.
Per match. It's LBW, and you think he was bowling, 80 miles an hour, but clearly had an amazing craft. But as you said, on Asian pitches, to be able to have the record that he did at his pace.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And he was a useful batsman. Another one of these left arm seamers who was a tidy number 8 as well.
So, Wasim Akram is the player that we remember, but that whole era, to me, is what changed left-arm bowling and is why we're in a position now where every bloody bowler is left-arm.
And I wonder if, and there's been a lot of talk about how DRS has helped spinners. I wonder if it's helped left-armers as well to get more LBWs.
Because of the
people have realised that there aren't so many balls pitched, more balls are pitching in line and hitting than maybe we thought before. Discuss.
No,
that's our job, isn't it?
Are you waiting for someone to answer?
I'm waiting for our listeners to sit down with exam papers.
Andy, I think you're correct.
Good. Right.
The Cricket Sadist Hour, for when something about badminton just isn't enough.
I'm going to talk about Dirk Nannes, and this is mostly about test bowling, but I think it's still... It makes sense. Dirk Nannes was a 29-year-old businessman who owned at that stage owned a company that was involved with skiing in Japan. And he would play club cricket in Melbourne, quite often in the thirds or fourths, because he'd have to disappear mid-year to go off and, I don't know what skiing people do, but...
Ski?
The slopes.
Right.
So he did that sort of thing, obviously almost qualified for Australia in the Winter Olympics and all that sort of thing. And as his career went on, someone sort of said to him, Dirk, maybe if you played a whole season of club cricket, you'd end up in the first and seconds and you'd have a chance. And so obviously he a couple of years there, he played cricket and then went on to represent Australia and the Netherlands, played maybe a couple of one-days, but obviously played T20, got an IPL contract. And the main reason why it made sense for Dirk Nannes to bowl is because he bowled basically like Mitchell Johnson, but without maybe the understanding of what he was doing when Dirk first started. He didn't really know. All Dirk knew how to do was bowl really quick, and people absolutely lost their mind. Batsmen were terrified of him. I remember watching Phil Hughes face him once, and Phil Hughes actually looked like he didn't want to be on the same ground as Dirk Nannes. And there's a reason why a bowler like Dirk Nannes, who at 28, 29 can suddenly get a contract. That doesn't happen that often, although it happens more in Victoria than in other places. But very rarely do 28, 29-year-olds start making their debut for Victoria. And that's because there actually aren't that many genuine left-arm quick bowlers in the whole history of the game. There aren't that many people who bowl genuinely quick. And I think that's why Wasim Akram made such a big impression as well. It's why Brett Schultz would have if he'd stayed on the pitch. So, and it's probably why your man Bill Vos was quite handy as well. So My theory is...
I've got another name to throw there, Jared.
Another left-arm quick?
Fred Morley.
Oh,
5 wickets at the Oval in 1880, reputedly the fastest bowler in England. Then on the way to Australia for the first ever Ashes series, 1882-83, they were involved in a boat crash on the way from Colombo to Australia. He broke a load of ribs, never recovered his form, got ill and died of dropsy about 18 months later.
that's a horrible story, but they did end up with a lot of chicken stores called Morley, which I'm assuming is in his honour.
Must be in his honour. But he was by repute the fastest bowler in England around about 1880.
How often do you think, have we ever had a situation where the fastest bowler in the world has been left arm, is my question.
Since then?
Since Fred Morley.
Well, Johnson was the quickest, I would think,
Yep.
wasn't he?
Stark's there and thereabouts.
Yeah.
My point is, it's very rare, even at the top level of cricket, to face a genuine left arm quick bowler. And so when you play junior cricket, so let's say you were talented and you were coming up through the Kent.
Hang on, I have quite a lively imagination, but this is really stretching it, Jared.
You come up through the Kent leagues and you face a bunch of young quick bowlers, almost all of which are right arm. Occasionally there's a left arm bowler there. It's the same when you play school cricket, it all the way through. It's really not until you get to professional level that you start to face a higher percentage of left arm quick bowlers, because anyone who's left arm and quick basically gets pushed through the system and ends up at professional level, because there's in club cricket, it's very rare to face more than one good left arm quick bowler at a time and even have one quick bowler. So your entire life, so young Andy Zaltzman, the superstar batsman of what club were you from?
The mighty Penshurst Park Cricket Club.
Whatever that was called.
Just a level below county standard.
So you come up and you've set up your batting triggers. Your footwork.
Well, batting triggers were putting your pads on and walking out to the middle. Is that
and essentially everything you've thought about as a batsman at that point is facing right arm bowling. And then you get to the top level and Dirk Nannes strolls in off a I was going to say out of a ski villa and starts bowling 90, I mean, at his best he was probably around 95 miles an hour, Dirk Nannes. Left arm quick at you. It's a completely different thing, and you need completely different skills. And it goes back to the Graham Swan thing of like facing a short ball from a left arm bowler is not like facing a short ball from a right arm bowler. Facing Wazam Akram coming around the wicket to you is not like anything that you've ever faced before. And I think that's a part of the reason why left arm bowlers have had slightly more success, is that there's less of them out there. And a lot of this, I think, is we've had a lot of left arm orthodox bowlers. And we've had a lot of left-handed batsmen. But I think to be a left-arm orthodox bowler or to be a left-handed batsman, you don't necessarily need to be a pure left-handed person. I think to be a left-arm quick bowler, you probably need to be legitimately left-handed.
right?
Does that make sense?
I'm not a scientist, Jared.
But it makes sense?
Unlike your good self. But yeah, that's there is something. Now, here's a stat that might be related to this. Looking at teams batting against right arm pace and left arm pace since 2000. Mm-hmm. So this millennium, when left armers are becoming increasingly prominent, England average better against right arm than left, average 34 against right arm fast bowlers, 31 against left arm fast bowlers. So they had trouble with Trent Boult, Mitchell Johnson, various others. India averaged 33 against right-handers. They averaged 44 against left-arm pacers.
That is interesting.
Pakistan averaged 30 against right-arm pacers, 38 against left-arm pacers. And they've both had quite a lot of left-armers in their teams over the years. So you wonder if they get more practice against it.
That's interesting.
So then, India had Zahir Khan, Ashish Nehra, Irfan Pathan, and Pakistan, as discussed, had a load of left armers. So I wonder if there's, and set against that, New Zealand averaged slightly less against left armers than right armers. But I wonder if there's, and Australia's the 39 against both left and right arm. Bangladesh basically the same. But there's a really noticeable gap for India and Pakistan that may be coincidence, and maybe because they have been practicing against their own left armers.
That is actually legitimately interesting. But I've got some other stats about the rise of left arm bowlers. So I've already said why I think it's harder for batsmen at the top level to face them in general, which is why they end up at the top level a lot of the time as well. 12% of society, as we sit here today, is left-handed. I don't know who did that survey. I don't know how we know it, but 12% seemed to be the number that was most commonly used on Wikipedia. But in 1880, when tests started, 2% of the society were left-handed. And in 1920, it was 4%. So we are actually, because I think now people aren't forced which hand to write with.
Battered out of them as children.
Yeah. And one of the most interesting things I read, which goes against India having lots of left-arm bowlers, and actually India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan having access to left-arm bowlers, is that apparently the Asian languages are very, very hard to write left-handed. That is
maybe
something
if you're left-handed, then it improves your hand skills as you learn.
Because you're trying to write.
Because it's so hard.
Yeah, I mean, I can't write Tamil in left hand or right hand, but I'm assuming that if it's it looks hard to write to begin with.
It looks fun to write.
Oh, it's a beautiful.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
It's one of I'm not going to say it's one of my favorite. It's definitely my favorite visual language.
I'm glad we've got to that point of this cricket podcast.
But essentially, yeah. So I think, there is an upswing in the amount of left-arm bowlers in the world. And I don't think it's just Wasim Akram and just cricket realising this. I think there are just more left-hand people than we've ever had before.
Yes,
pure
people,
left-hand.
People allowed to grow up as left-handed.
Sorry, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Look at you. You were beaten as a child.
No, my parents were entirely happy with my choice to be left-handed.
It was it was the teachers. I've got a little bit more science for you, but before we get to the science, so in the last 5 years of top-level T20 cricket in the power play, 10 of the best 20 bowlers in the world, and by that I mean lowest economy, because it's T20, are left-arm. Basically, left-arm bowlers in T20 cricket seem to be even more valued than they do in Test cricket. And there's something else quite interesting that there was a study... And I think there's been a few studies on sport and left-handedness. I can't find the name of the study, but it was a study by sports scientist Florian Loffing, it's a good name, who looked into sports, and they said...
Good thing for a sports scientist to look into, Joe.
Which is handy.
Kept his focus on the game.
So after looking at the numbers, Loffing reported that he found a pattern where in sports where there's a short time constraint, left-handers appeared to excel. He found, for example, in squash, left-handers weren't as dominant, whereas in sports like baseball, they certainly were. In table tennis, 26% of the top male players were left-handed. And so in table tennis, baseball, and cricket, you were 2.6 times as likely to have a top left-hander as in other sports.
Right, there you go.
Obviously, doesn't mean that you as a left-hand batsman have any advantage over Ricky Ponting.
Well, we don't know that. We've never played in the same team.
True. But in general, I think as a population, it's saying that there is an advantage. Basically, what I'm saying is I read this study and I'm teaching both my sons to bat left-handed.
So in golf, there have been very few top left-handed players.
Is that because it's hard to find clubs?
I think that is part of it. As if you're wanting to try as a child, the fact there aren't many people with left-handed clubs might be a factor. But there have been very few major players who've been left-handed in golf.
And so I suppose...
Which obviously is a sport that does not require cat-like reflexes.
Do you know what I mean? And you're not up against someone that either there, which is, I think, one of the things that they were saying in this study. But basically, I think there's a lot of different reasons. It's easy to fixate on Wasim Akram because he's awesome. But there's a lot of different reasons why left-arm bowlers are getting better and are taking over the game. And I think, especially in T20 cricket, where your reaction time, you've got to react even quicker because you've got to hit a six rather than nudge a ball to cover. And I think I can see why left-arm bowlers would be even more important in that stage. And I think the general angles too, like left arm finger spinners don't have a lot of tricks, but they quite often have really low economy rates in T20 cricket. And I think, yet again, a lot of that is to do with the angle that they have, not just that they're spinning the ball away from right-handers, but those sorts of things definitely do help. But it's very interesting that basically left armers are dominating almost every form of cricket at the moment. And considering beforehand, it was Fred Morley on his own.
Are you outside cricket? Oh, then you have no business here.
On the Cricket Sadist Hour.
Are left-arm bowlers in modern cricket better than right-arm bowlers?
No.
I like that.
Yeah. I don't think they're better. But, yeah, they are currently, as discussed earlier on, enjoying a period of prominence. And there's no reason to think that period of prominence will end for other reasons, as discussed, that left-handedness is no longer punished with being burnt at the stake or having your arm chopped off.
You've got so many issues. Look at you. Show me all your scars from teachers beating your knuckles.
This decade, as I mentioned this stat earlier on, left-arm pacers have a 3.1% advantage in average over right-arm pacers.
So they are better.
In Test cricket. They are, but
better.
Yeah, that's...
It's not a massive jump.
It's not a massive... So left-arm fast averaging 31.0 this decade, right-arm fast 31.99. So...
That's actually, I mean, it's only 3%, but that's a significant difference, I would think, between the two. It wouldn't make me think, but I've got to pick another left armer. But
that might be just because there's been Mitchell Johnson, Trent Bolt, whether it's significant, signifying of a broader trend.
You overlook Neil Wagner.
And Neil Wagner. Well, I mean, I say it's the age of Wagner. That goes as red now. It'll be viewed by, we had the Pliocene era and then, the Wagnerian era we're in now. We talked about in billions of years to come. But I mean, Wagner's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because he again is not a bowler that does magic with the ball, and he's not fast.
So I got in a lot of trouble. So I compared him to Mohamed Amir recently in a piece, and basically saying that he was like a pickup truck that couldn't go beyond third gear. But has an incredible record. People got very upset. But I meant that in a good way because he has no discernible skills. That he's not incredibly fast. He doesn't move the ball sideways a lot. And he's not an incredible setup bowler like Vernon Philander. And yet, he takes wickets everywhere. He basically bowls medium fast short balls at people and yells at them and gets wickets. Which I find incredible. Like what? He's cracked code. And so I love Neil Wagner, but I can understand why other people may not share my love.
Well, he's a really interesting bowler from that point of view, and particularly if he bowled the same way right-handed, I think it wouldn't be nearly as effective, would it?
I don't think so. I think the angle really helps him, and I think
in terms of effectiveness, he's and his stats are amazing as well. His records pretty similar. It's a little bit better than Bolt.
Yeah, I think he's averaged less than
Southey.
Bolt over the last 2.5 years. He's certainly better than Southey. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. So the fact that we have so many left-arm bowlers, I don't think we can just say that the numbers are favouring them because we've had Mitchell Johnson and Trent Bolt. Because, to be fair, right-arm bowling's had Dale Steyn.
Yes. Yeah, true. I think there's clearly a generation of very effective left-arm bowlers. England have slightly missed out on this. We had Sam Curran make his Test debut earlier this summer. He was the first since Ryan Sidebottom played his last.
Do you think he'll take 300 or 400 Test wickets?
6 or 7, I think.
6 or 7 wickets.
But again, I mean, we see this. As soon as he bowled half a delivery, people were saying, "Oh, he's too slow and he's too short." And then you think, well, Chaminda Vaas did all right with those two attributes. So, but we'd love to make massive snap judgments.
Oh, as he was running up, I said he was finished. In fact, he put his marker down in a way that just to me showed that he could not take Test wickets.
But we're obsessed with pace in this country. It's almost like
I think everyone's obsessed with pace.
We have never seen Vernon Philander bowl. Whenever he comes, we just switch off our televisions. I think, we have nothing to learn from this. We've got to be bowling 90 miles an hour from 12 feet in the air. Yeah.
Well, if Jamie Porter was only 6 inches taller, left arm, he would have already played 80 tests for England.
It's almost like we've also never seen Anderson bowls. Anyway.
Hello, I'm the late former Australian Captain Herbie Horseshoe Collins, and this is Cricket's Saddest Hour. Sorry, the Cricket Sadist Hour. My mistake.
Andy,
Yes.
what percentage of left arm seam would Bradman have faced compared to Steve Smith, Coley, those sorts of guys?
A low percentage, Jared. We don't have the full...
And I want
ball.
an exact...
Well, I can tell you, during the course of his career, only around about 5 to 6% of deliveries would have been left arm seam, and only about 10% of fast bowling was left arm. Over the course of Bradman's career, he played 19 tests in England, and in only 3 of them did England have a left arm fast bowler, or seam bowler even. Nobby Clark
Knobs.
played 2 tests in 1934, he took 5 for 98 at the Oval in 1934 in a game Australia won comfortably. And Alan Watkins of Glamorgan played in Bradman's last ever test.
Watto.
But as famously, Bradman did not get as far as facing him for 2 reasons. One, that he was out second ball, and 2, that Watkins was already injured and out of the attack by that time. So only twice did he face a left arm pacer in England. He faced Vos in 10 tests in Australia. Vos took 35 wickets in those games at an average of 27, which is pretty tidy. He faced Neville Quinn of South Africa in the 1931-32 series. Quinn got him out, and Bradman said his pace off the wicket he found very difficult. But basically, that was it in terms of left arm pacers that Bradman faced.
So 6% of the deliveries of his era, and if you're Smith or Coley, what percentage of it would it be?
Smith or Coley, well, it's been this decade, it's 11.6% by left-arm fast bowlers.
So it's doubled.
Close to 20% of all pace deliveries are by left-armers now.
So Bradman, had he played in this era, would have really struggled, is what
He'd
you're
have
saying.
averaged mid-20s, I think.
Yeah.
He would have been essentially like James Vince, but less pretty to watch.
So 23 bowlers have taken over 300 wickets since Akram's debut. Of those 23, 4 are left-arm quicks and only 2 are left-arm spinners. So basically, left-arm bowling has inverted. Even more so, because before there were no left-arm quicks and there was heaps of left-arm finger spinners. So it's quite interesting how much that has changed. But I think my favourite thing to notice how much cricket has changed was when Pakistan came here last time. So was that 2016?
Yeah.
And they had an all left arm seam bowling thing, and everyone went, "Are there too many left arms in this attack?" Almost oblivious to the fact that our entire lives we've had to watch 3, 4, 5 right arm bowlers bowl seam over and over again, and suddenly there were 3 left arm bowlers, and everyone, is it too many left arm bowlers? Is there too many left arm bowlers in modern cricket? Probably, but get over it. Mike Whitney is awesome. This is the age of Wagner. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast.
Goodbye.
This is the Cricket Sadist Hour, sponsored by the human race, planet Earth's #1 species.
If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or share it on social medias, or, I don't know, just play it in your grandmother's ear as much as possible.
Play it on public transport at the loudest possible volume.
And thank you very much for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more nonsense.